About 2 weeks ago, I started using Chimera Linux on my ThinkPad X201, and I have a lot of different thoughts. I want to cover three main topics in today's video. I want to talk a little bit about what is Chimera and what makes it kind of unique, why I've enjoyed using Chimera, and why I would also recommend it for you for your own kind of personal use. It's not going to be anything like super formal. I'm not going to be like grading this here. I'm not going to be comparing it super hard against any other distros. This is more so kind of my thoughts and opinions based on my time spent with the distro and some of the research that I've done along the way. And I think that's pretty much all there is to say before we actually just kind of get into things. Let's kind of start the Chimera Linux video. So, Chimera Linux is a very interesting independent Linux distribution. It was started, I think, in 2021. A ex Void developer, Q66, left the Void project in search of something new, and that something new would eventually turn into Chimera Linux, and it's something else. The name Chimera comes from the kind of core architecture here. It is a kind of unexpected combination of a few different interesting pieces. So instead of GNU libc, we're using musl, so non-standard C library. This is pretty nice. I'm not going to talk too much about this in great detail, as I'm not too familiar with all of the differences under the hood. The main takeaway from this is binary compatibility is going to be pretty limited, but we're going to talk about that more later in the kind of usage section. But yeah, we're using musl, and we're also using the FreeBSD userland as opposed to the kind of traditional core utils. That's pretty interesting. I'll be honest with you, in day-to-day use, I don't necessarily know what the big difference is here, but yeah, it's something to be aware of. And the final kind of piece of the puzzle here is the APK package manager coming from Alpine Linux. Now, this is not just the base version of APK. It doesn't use the same repositories as Alpine. This is APK v3. Again, I'm not exactly sure in great detail what's changed here. They have some information on their website if you're interested in reading more about this. But ultimately, it's kind of everything that you know and love if you've used Alpine. So APK is very fast, it's very simple, and I've really enjoyed using it. The syntax is super straightforward. I mean, it's just basic things like add, delete, and search. They're kind of identical to the actual operations you're performing, so there's really nothing crazy when it comes to memorizing things. The search feature is pretty generous. I think it seems to include like metadata and descriptions for the keywords that you're searching, so you don't have to be super exact. You can kind of cast a fairly wide net there. Overall, it's very nice. Updating and upgrading is pretty straightforward as well. The kind of final piece of the puzzle here with Chimera is the init system. We are free of systemd here on Chimera. It's using dinit, and I've really, once again, enjoyed the experience with dinit. It's honestly super familiar coming from systemd, so all of your systemctl commands are just going to be replaced with their dinitctl equivalent, all the same enable, start, stop, all those kinds of things. They're all going to be the same here. So kind of basic process and startup maintenance is no different than it would be anywhere else if you haven't used anything other than systemd. And that's about all I have to say about that. Nothing really crazy going on there. Depending on your desktop environment and kind of choice of backend there, whether you're on Xorg or Wayland, there may be some different things that you'll have to set up, some things with like dbus and polkit and things like that. But a lot of that was really early on, and I want to say that a lot of it was pretty plug and play, just grabbing things from the package repos and installing them. Yeah, I don't know, it hasn't been too bad. Those are kind of the things that make Chimera Chimera. I mean, just kind of glossing over them, at a glance, I think it makes for a pretty interesting system. And initially, seeing all of these things, I was very curious to kind of get some hands-on experience. That said, I was pretty sure that this was going to be kind of like a project distro. I was pretty ready to throw this on the X201, but I didn't know how much actual mileage I was going to get out of it. And honestly, in just about every way, it really surprised me in very, very positive ways. This has become a system that I'm very excited to boot up every day. I'm using it more than any of my other systems when it comes to classwork and just kind of day-to-day things. It's I don't know, it's different, it's kind of weird, it's anemic in a lot of ways, and it takes a lot of time to do things that may otherwise be pretty straightforward, but it's a very rewarding process, and I think that's going to be kind of one of the key takeaways and highlights of the process as we talk through it here. And I guess that's kind of a good segue into the next section, which is going to be the kind of practical takeaways from the last 2 or so weeks using Chimera every day. And this looks like a lot of building things from source. This is definitely not any kind of a dig on the software that's available through the Chimera repos. They're much bigger than you may expect for such a kind of, I don't want to say oddball, but such a unique independent distro. It's pretty small. You don't see a lot of people talking about it, but they offer a lot of, the really good kind of core things that you'd expect. But the things they don't offer, they do offer the build tools that you'd otherwise need to assemble all of your own kind of software and tools. And I found myself doing that quite a lot. They have a build system for the package manager that allows you to kind of spin up your own recipes and, kind of automate these things. I haven't gotten very deep into that. It's not that I don't have the interest, and to be honest, I guess it would be unfair to say that I haven't had the time, but it's just not something that has happened yet. A lot of what this has looked like is, going to GitHub, going to Codeberg, and honestly, I think that this has been pretty beneficial. Doing this on the X201, doing this on a muscle distro, it kind of makes sense. I think a lot of these things, like if they're not going to be on the repos to begin with, might as well just kind of spin up your own binaries. It's been a pretty good experience. I mean, again, a lot of the main things that you'd expect, whether it's Xorg or Wayland, you can get that from the repos. A lot of the core software you expect for either of those things. Window managers, desktop environments, it's kind of all there. It's a lot of the more kind of nitpicky libraries once you start getting into your actual like day-to-day workflows. For me, it was once I started actually trying to do things like writing Python or R that I started to realize some things were missing that I needed. I mean, fundamentally, the R language is not on the Chimera repos, and so I had to build that from source. And again, it's not any crazy undertaking, but these are things that are otherwise accommodated for by things like Void being, another small-ish independent distro. I ended up going for a LabWC setup here. So I'm running Wayland with WL roots, and then I have configured LabWC. I only discovered it about a week ago, and it honestly is kind of the answer to just about all of my Wayland problems. When I was checking out FreeBSD a while back, I started using CWM on there. I really enjoy it, and I've been looking for a workflow and a setup like that on Wayland pretty much since then, and I was pretty convinced that I was going to have to make it myself. And LabWC entered the picture. The rest has been kind of history. I've really enjoyed learning their kind of like XML syntax, playing around with some of the kind of light CSS stuff, building out, just menus, tailoring it to how I want to use it has been very fun. And otherwise, just trying to keep things very clean. I have a very minimal, like text only waybar and a keybind for toggling it. Otherwise, I'm using sway lock, sway background, just all of the sway tools. I figured since I was using WL roots anyway, I might as well just stick with that. Outside of like the actual like desktop environment and some of my like tools like R that we were talking about earlier, I've also built some games. I have Aleph 1 and the original Marathon trilogy. I'm playing through those on here, and that's been a total blast. I also have Crispy Doom that's actually on the Chimera repos. And once again, that's been very fun. I also have Quake, specifically Libre Quake, and that's a good time as well. All three of those run well on here. The X201 is pretty old by today's standards, but 2010 is still plenty new for all of these titles. I actually tried to get Halo Combat Evolved working on here too, but the issue was just kind of translation and compatibility hell, right? So I set up a wine prefix for it. I installed it, I patched it, I did all of the Combat Evolved things. But no matter what I did, no matter what flags I ran it with, I couldn't even get like a couple frames per second in the menu. And so there was like something really, really wrong. This thing only has OpenGL 2.1 by virtue of being first gen Intel. And so I think that we're kind of just getting bottlenecked in the process of trying to translate DirectX to OpenGL or whatever, and then not really having a GPU. I think there's just a lot working against it. If I get that working, I would like to talk about that in the future, but I've kind of temporarily put that on ice because I don't know if that's ever going to work well. I've also kind of considered potentially maybe putting Steam on here and seeing if Proton just kind of automatically deals with that, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. I don't have any like heavy browser in an application apps on here right now. I've omitted VS Code and all of that stuff. Like the browser is the only browser. There's no Electron or anything like that, and I'm trying to keep it that way. But if I do think that Steam will help me get away with playing Halo, I might go that route. But I might explore some of the other options from like kind of the Steam Deck realm. I know there's stuff like Lutris. I don't know if there's other tools in that space, but just something that might make it easier to kind of manage the all the options because I get really overwhelmed doing all the wine stuff. Bit of a tangent there with the games, but that was definitely a kind of fun side quest during all of this. But I think that kind of again highlights part of the kind of most fun that I've had along the way with Chimera. And it really has been just this kind of process of learning how to use the system. And once I kind of got comfortable with it, it has just been a really great kind of sandbox. It's been fun to just kind of put the X201 through its paces, and I feel like this is a kind of great system for doing that. I think it's kind of fun. You have a lot of, the things that you're looking for available through your package manager, but it's sort of like almost indirectly in some ways a source-based distro just by the amount of stuff that you're going to have to build on your own. But I think that's okay. I think it's honestly kind of cool. So I don't know. I think that Chimera is probably not a distro that I'm going to put like on my desktop. I'm probably not going to use this as like my daily driver on all my devices, but I do think that it's something that I plan on keeping around for the foreseeable future. I really don't think that I can come up with a good reason to want to get rid of it. And honestly, I think that this system that I've gotten, kind of set up here on the X201 is kind of one of my most like stable and kind of rock solid kind of setups that I've put together since I started using Linux every day. This is a distro that I've really enjoyed kind of getting to know, and I look forward to kind of continue getting to use it for the foreseeable future. As far as my recommendations on Chimera, kind of based on everything that I've said thus far, I think the best way for me to put it is going to be this. I think Chimera is great for anyone who is kind of experienced or otherwise interested in kind of experiencing a bit more of a hands-on distro, and not in the sense that it kind of incurs any of its own like ordeals or like big challenges, but it's gonna kind of challenge you to really think about the system for the parts that it is. You're going to get errors when you try and run things or build things, and you're going to have to just kind of think through kind of what's going on, there's going to start to be these common errors, and you're going to start to realize that it has to do with the C compiler, or it has to do with the difference in where your libraries are. I mean, there's a lot of things that are standard here, but there's a lot of things that are just different enough that you're going to have to make these little tweaks. And as I've gotten to this place where I have, all these workflows that I need for school and all these other tools that I need, these games working, like it's just been very satisfying, kind of one at a time, overcoming these things and kind of figuring out what I need to do to get it all working. It's kind of just the Linux experience, but doing it on Chimera has been just very fun. It's felt very rewarding, and I think that it's good. It kind of keeps all the gears turning. So the verdict is pretty simple. I think if you're looking for like a rock solid system, this may not be that. I will say it is probably something along the lines of Void, if we're talking about like how often we're getting updates and overall stability. It's a very, very stable, very usable system. I think that there's just enough kind of difference in your, maybe not day-to-day usage, but as you get into building things and honestly sometimes just randomly using different software, there's going to be enough issues that crop up from the fact that you're on muscle, from the fact that it's the FreeBSD user land. I mean, these things, they'll throw errors, and if you're not ready to kind of sink some time into understanding where they come from and learning the kind of, fixes for these things, I don't think you're really going to enjoy it. But otherwise, I've had a great time, and I think that you will too. I think Chimera Linux is a super cool project, and I'm very glad that I found it. With all that kind of said and done, I think that brings me about to the end of my thoughts here on Chimera. I think I'll maybe check back in at some point again in the future. I was working on trying to build a PinePhone image of Chimera before I worked on this video, and enough time has just passed now that I figured I would do this video, just kind of, make sure that I get this out, make this happen, and we'll do some kind of follow-up if and when I get the PinePhone working. Portability is another feature that Chimera seems to pride itself for, and the build tools seem very familiar to what Void offered. They just don't have the like pre-built PinePhone kernel image, so the process is a little more involved, and I was already kind of out of my element doing this with Void. So we will cross that bridge sometime soon. Otherwise, that has been my thoughts thus far on Chimera Linux. I appreciate you guys for taking some time out of your day to kind of stop by and listen to me ramble on for a while. I'll have some new stuff coming out sometime in the coming weeks. I appreciate your patience and your recent support. We are kind of climbing past 230 subscribers now. That feels pretty crazy to say out loud. So thank you very much for that. I will keep doing what I'm doing. You guys keep doing what you're doing, and I will see you again sometime very soon. Thank you very much.